This is Jim Cason with Riverbend Fellowship in Riverbend, North Carolina, with the weekly Bible study. Last week we kind of wrapped up the study we'd been in since the first of the year on battles in the Bible, and we're beginning something new. It's a little bit different approach, but it's the same kind of material. The things which were, the things which are, and the things which are to come. Now, Bible students will recognize that title as being from the book of Revelation. So, the general idea is that this is going to be on prophecy, with a particular focus on prophecies for the second advent of Christ, and prophecies that have been partially fulfilled but not completely fulfilled. And many are not aware of just how extensive prophecy is. Most people that know anything at all about the Bible are aware of the book of Revelation being prophecy, but they often don't think so much about the others. But they're in the Old Testament, they're in the New Testament, and we're going to kind of look at a very brief summary of this particular lesson on passages before the books of the prophets. That's where the majority of prophecy is in the Old Testament, but it is by no means the only place. In fact, the very first prophecy that we know of in the Bible was in the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis, all the way back. The fall had just happened. Adam and Eve had just eaten of the forbidden fruit, and God had told them what was going to happen, how the earth would be cursed. But God also speaks to the serpent. Now, we know that the serpent here was a representation of our ancient enemy, known as Lucifer or Satan. Genesis 3, chapter 14, or verse 14 and 15. So, the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life." Verse 15, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Now, this is very brief, and it doesn't really sound like prophecy to begin with, except for this matter of tenses. I will. In other words, I haven't already done this, and because of this, you're cursed. We don't know what a snake looked like before this happened. For all we know, they may have had legs, been able to walk around, they might have been able to fly. We just don't know. The Bible doesn't say that. But what it does say is snakes, one of the first things people notice about snakes is they slither. Yeah. Some of them can strike. They can raise themselves up long enough to strike, but their basic movement is moving on the ground. They have hundreds and hundreds of little, I guess you could call them ribs, and these ribs work in coordination so that they move along the ground that way. And enmity between you and the woman. I've never done any official survey of this, but I will say that hatred of snakes occurs in some men, but it occurs in most women. Most of them just don't want to be around one. They don't want one anywhere near them. And this last little section, between your seed and her seed, now her seed here is capitalized in the Old Testament, and it's speaking about Jesus Christ. He, which is also capitalized, shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now, part of this has happened already. At the first advent of Jesus, in the crucifixion, Satan was able to bruise his heel. In fact, Satan was feeling pretty good about that right then. Oh boy, I've already handled it. He's no longer here. I've killed him. My enemy's over. I got it made. But then there was Friday night, Saturday night, and early Sunday morning, and the resurrection. And this story's not done yet, even now. He shall bruise your head. And if we go all the way towards the end of the book of Revelation, and some in some other places, we find that Satan has a long-term eternal destiny in the lake of fire, forever and ever. And this is not all the prophecy in Genesis. There's more scattered all the way through, various little sections. If you move up to Genesis chapter 8, now this is after the story of Noah and the flood, and the flood has gone down on the earth, and the ark has landed, as we think, on Mount Ararat, and Noah and his family have gotten out of the ark, the animals have gotten out of the ark. And one of the very first things that happened, Genesis 8, starting with verse 20, then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered up burnt offerings on the altar. Now, this is before Noah does any exploring. It's before he tries to build himself a house. It's before he even builds himself a tent. It's before he goes out and looks around for something to eat. He built an altar to the Lord. He was thankful. Can you imagine? We don't know if he was seasick or not, but we do know he was shut up in that boat for a long time, he and his wife and all the animals, and they had a lot of work to do taking care of the animals, feeding them and cleaning up after them during all that time. And he must have really, really been thankful. You ever really, really, really been thankful to God for something that's happened in your life? I expect Noah was really, really happy, really, really joyful, and really, really thankful. Going on with verse 21. The Lord smelled a soothing aroma. And this is how burnt offerings are described to God, if they're offered by people in the right spirit. And then the Lord said in his heart, and this wasn't a brand new surprise to him, it's just a matter of it records it, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again ever destroy every living thing as I have done. And he makes a promise in verse 22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. Now we know that this earth is going to be made over into new heavens and new earth. We don't know if some people think the present earth would be totally destroyed. I tend more to the view he did it once. It said when he started with earth, it was formless and void and without much of anything on it, because he'd already created that part. But while the earth remains, we know these things will happen. We know that there's going to be particular times that you plant seed, and it's not always the same time for every seed, but there's times you plant seeds, and there's times for harvesting the seeds. And that's real important if you like to eat. And even if eating's not your favorite thing, you have to eat to stay alive. Cold and heat. Yes, sure enough, it's supposed to get up over 95 on this particular day, Thursday, while we're recording this thing. And we also know that in the middle of this winter, it'll get way down there. Winter and summer. Yep, sure enough. Spring and fall too, but winter and summer are mentioned. And day and night shall not cease. Then Genesis chapter 10 and 11. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but you might find it interesting reading. It's a prophecy of all the nations that will be descended from Noah. And it kind of goes into the matters of different ones of the sons of Noah being the progenitors of people that spread around to different parts of the earth. And, you know, we have all these problems nowadays with racial injustice and differences and hatred between the races, but if you really trace it back and you believe the scripture, every single person that's on this planet now, and all the ones that have been on and all the ones that are going to be on, are all really descended from Noah, his wife, his sons, the women involved, every single one. I don't know. First off, we don't know exactly what color Noah was. We do know that the people that live in Israel now, the Jewish people that are scattered around the world, they are not pure white. They're not Caucasian. They are Semitic as a description. If you've ever been over there like I have, they don't kind of look completely white. They're not quite as much as army olive drab, but they are kind of olive. They're not black, they're not brown, but they're also not white. And we don't know why God did this. He does not explain a lot of this stuff. He doesn't say where white people came from, where black people came from, where brown people came from, where the yellowish ones came from, where the reddish ones came from. But we do know one thing: they all came from Noah and his wife. Every one of us. From Adam and his wife also, but since all the others were destroyed, it had to be from Noah and his wife. Let's move on a little further to Genesis chapter 12. Now we're talking about Abram, the one that would become Abraham, or the real Hebrew pronunciation is Abraham. We're in chapter 12, starting with the first verse. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you." There's a bunch of different prophecy right here. First off, Abram is getting some instructions that were kind of different from the normal. You know, Noah got some instructions and he paid attention, and he built a boat, and it says it took about 100 years to build that boat, and the whole time his neighbors and everything were cursing him, laughing at him, making fun of him. Well, Abram has family. He's got a bunch of people. It's apparently a pretty good-sized family and in pretty decent straits. But God tells him, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house. Sometimes he tells us to do something like that. To a land that I will show you. I don't know about you. I kind of like to know where I'm going before I go, but I don't always know exactly where I'm going before I go. And this was a case where Abram was told to go somewhere he didn't know where he was going. And you know, there's something kind of special on that too. We are told that we are now citizens of the new earth and the new heaven, even though they haven't appeared yet. And we're supposed to be good citizens there. Everything that's in this world is not supposed to be our primary concern. Our primary concern is what is to come and the trip that we are making. So that's prophetic. Verse 2, I will make you a great nation. This kind of got a little bit of doubt in Abram and in Sarai, because Sarai tried her own thing first because she didn't have any kids. And how are you going to become a great nation if you don't have any kids? I will bless you and make your name great. And if you go through and you look at the life of Abram, he got blessed in some times. He also got run out of some places, and it's kind of like our lives. We get really greatly blessed and appreciate it some of the time, and we find some of the time that it's not something we really look forward to or think back real happy about until we realize that every single thing that happens to us, and this is something that's hard to realize and hard to keep in mind, but every single thing that happens to us is for a purpose. Some things happen to us to make us either do something that we haven't wanted to do or to make us quit doing something we've been doing. And it's not always a pleasant process. You shall be a blessing. And that's certainly so. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. I read some books from time to time that are not in the Bible, and I've read several books by Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, and Rabbi Jonathan goes through a great deal of study of history of the various nations, and it's been true all the way through history. If a nation blessed the people of Israel when they were there, that nation was blessed. Just one example, the country of Spain. They were greatly blessed because they accepted the Jews when they got run out of somewhere else for a while. And then this time came along that they didn't do that, and you know that within a generation or two, the whole Spanish Empire was a has-been. It just didn't exist. And We find this to be true also in England. England had a worldwide empire, but that was because they blessed the Jewish people. And then they didn't bless the Jewish people, and that great empire died. And this last little section is special to us Christians that are not natural-born Jewish. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So, right here from the beginning, before Moses, long before Moses, before there was ever such a thing as the law we call the Mosaic Law, and the Jewish people had to live under all those rules that are given in the Old Testament in the books of Moses, it says right in the beginning, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And you and I, since we were not direct descendants of Abraham, ought to be really, really thankful that we were grafted into the vine. We were put in along with the natural branches of the tree, spliced in there and allowed to flourish and be blessed. Continuing on with Abram, a little bit longer, he's become very, very wealthy. He has a lot of servants, he has a lot of donkeys, he has a lot of cattle, he has a lot of other things. And he's gone out, and his nephew Lot had gone along with him, and then they separated, and Abram told Lot, says, okay, you pick out where you'll go and I'll take the other place because there's not enough food here to feed our flocks for both of us. So Lot took the easy way out. He took the way out where the most water was and where he could have an easy life. And I never really appreciated that so much, even though I've been to Israel and I've seen the ground there, until right now I'm working my way through the Moody Atlas of the Bible, and it goes in and describes geography, it describes history, it describes the conditions and so forth. And you know, right here in North Carolina, we get rain. Sometimes we get a lot of rain for a long time, and we don't think much about it. But the first time I ever went out west to the southwest, I spent a week out in the southwest at Fort Huachuca, and that was the first time I'd ever seen desert. And I kind of wondered before that happened. I looked at a road map of the state, and there was way these great big territories with no roads in it, and I couldn't figure out exactly why. Well, I found out why. If there's no water, there's no life. So towns and roads and so forth get built where there's water. Anyhow, Lot goes where there was a bunch of water, and Abram takes the part where there wasn't. But then Lot got in trouble. These 5 kings got together and they had a fight, and among other things they captured Lot and his family. And Abram took part of his servants. He built himself up an army. He went out there and he conquered them, and he was on his way back home. And he was going near a town called Salem. And that's right, Jerusalem. That was Salem. We're in chapter 14 of Genesis, a little short section with verse 18. Then Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. This was long before the Levitical priesthood. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into his hand. And he, meaning Abram, gave him a tithe of all. That's very, very important. Long before the Levitical priesthood began, God is showing his method of supporting his people that are the priests. And we're all priests now, but he's showing those that work in the gospel full time how they're supposed to get supported. And also, I'm studying right now in the book of Hebrews, and you go in the book of Hebrews and you find Melchizedek in there. Then we go right towards the last of Genesis. We're not looking at Abram now. We are looking now at the 12 tribes and the blessings that were given to them by Jacob, who became Israel, renamed by God. Genesis chapter 49, starting with verse 8. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's kind of interesting to go through all of them and see just how the tribes were treated after that, and if you go trace that out. But we're looking at one tribe in particular. No, it's not the Levitical tribe. We're looking at Judah. You know, Judas himself was from Judah. Judah, you are he who your brother shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Very, very important. I'll come back to it. Nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. This scepter was a symbol of rule. Kings at that time had a scepter. Kind of think of it like a king with the more recent one's a big ball on the end, maybe jewels on it and so forth. But that was a symbol of their rule. And the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from beneath his feet, until Shiloh comes. And this, to some sense, was talking about the biblical town named Shiloh, but to a far greater sense, it's talking about that Shiloh that is yet to come, when Jesus returns. We go on through a few more sections in the books of Moses. Prophecy directly. Deuteronomy 18, verse 18. I will raise up for them a prophet like you, he's speaking of Moses, from among their brethren, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And if you go through and you look in the Gospels, you will find that Jesus said he didn't just mouth off on his own, he spoke what his Father commanded. Moving on in Deuteronomy to chapter 21, starting with verse 22. If a man has committed a sin deserving of death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain overnight on the tree. But you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, for he who is hanged is accursed of God. We don't typically think of the crucifixion as hanging, but in fact it was. That was a tree that was put into the ground, a chunk of a tree, with another chunk nailed sideways on it, so it would give a place to hang the person. He wasn't hanged by the neck like we think of a typical hanging today, but he was hanged because he was pinned. His arms had nails driven through him, and there was a nail, his two ankles were pushed together and a nail driven through them. So he was hanged. And in fact, you typically did not die of crucifixion for a right good while. It could be longer than a day. But eventually you died because you got weak enough and your legs got weak enough that you couldn't push yourself back up to breathe. And remember, Jesus had to be accursed. Remember when he was on there? My God, why have you forsaken me? He had to be forsaken in order to be the Lamb of God who was slain for us. Now, more places that we're not going to go into in detail, but you can look at Exodus chapter 12, verses 3 to 5 and 21 to 23 and 46. This describes the Passover lamb without blemish, the Messiah. None of his bones will be broken. And this is long before Isaiah made that prophecy in more detail. Leviticus chapter 16, verse 27, killed outside the gates, and those were given also. Now, all of these and more were given just in the 5 books of Moses. And there were little snippets of prophecy through all the books in between them and the books we typically call prophecy. There were a lot of little things like that, and Lord, if we went through all those, Jesus might have come before we got through with this study, which could happen anyhow, even between now and next week. But little snippets continue through all of these books that are not really known as prophetic. Isaiah and Jeremiah, particularly Isaiah, have many, many prophecies, and some of them fulfilled, some of them partially fulfilled, and some of them not yet fulfilled, as are Ezekiel and Daniel. And yes, we're going to spend some time, God willing, looking into Jeremiah, a bit of time looking into Jeremiah. We're going to spend a good bit of time in Ezekiel and Daniel. Then we'll go on, and we come to Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. And these, a lot of people don't pay much attention to them. You don't often find preachers preaching from these books, but they call them the minor prophets. Well, I'm not a ball player, but I would be willing to guess that if you were to take the sport of baseball, that some of the players in the minor league are just as good as one in the major league. In fact, really, that's where they typically get the major league players, is they pull them out of the minor leagues where they have proven themselves. And this term minor, really, it just means they're shorter. Isaiah is a great big long book, over 60 chapters. Some of these things only have a single chapter. Most of them only have a few chapters. But it's a matter of being shorter. It's not at all a matter that they are not as important or far-ranging, and many have not yet been fulfilled. You know, people have done research on this, and there are more than twice as many prophecies of the Messiah, Jesus' return, than of his first advent. Then, when we get into the New Testament, all 4 of the Gospels have prophecies in them. Many are not yet fulfilled. Fact is, most of these are spoken by Jesus himself, and he very frequently quoted from the Old Testament, referring to these events that had not yet occurred. And truly, even though we think of Revelation as primarily the book of prophecy, most of the books in between John and Revelation have prophecies as well as other teachings. Finally, we come to the last book, the Revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, many people have known this as the Revelation of John, but John recorded it. He wasn't the one who actually had it. Jesus was the one that spoke it. It was named specifically as the Revelation of Jesus. And this first week in this section is kind of a quick run through of where things started and where we're going, God willing. There will be considerable amplification on a lot of the later prophecies that were given and further along in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Now, typically we end these things with a matter of prayer. I usually started off with local prayers that people need to be praying for if you're part of our local congregation or if you just want to pray for them. Whether you know the people or not doesn't matter. They still need prayer. Tiffany Pegram, Louis Ames, Doug Locklear, Maddie Jones, Christian Matthew Propst, David Farlardew, Kathy Peace, Evelyn Irwin, Joanne Jordan. I am pleased to report that starting Friday, which is tomorrow when this is recorded, but before Sunday when it was made for, Ms. Irwin and Ms. Jordan can again receive some visitation. North Carolina is going from what he's called Phase 2 to Phase 2.5. Pray for schools, the teachers, they're having a rough time of it, the parents and the kids, and for provision of internet services that are needed. Some of these families are being required to have kids there for teaching over the internet, and they don't have any internet access. And this week in particular, pray for these businesses that have managed to survive, and for that matter, for the owners of those that didn't, for the past 6 months of being forcibly closed, and they're finally being permitted to open it, at least to be able to open to some degree. I imagine in many cases the employees that they had have moved on to other things. So they've got to find a way of serving people. They've got to find a way of doing less business and still managing to survive and having a lot more things they have to do. And no, I know these are not considered spiritual things, but they need to be prayed that for anyhow. How about all these people in the areas that were struck hard by the recent hurricane? And for those that are going there, and for those that are willing to contribute in various things that are needed, including money, to help these people recover. And let's go a little bit further forward. We're in September now. In the United States, there's elections coming up in November. And let's pray for the public to make godly decisions in this upcoming election. Because they're really, this one is important. There is a tremendous amount of difference spiritually. And you know, if you're a Christian, you should be voting if you're in a place that you can. But you shouldn't be voting just on account of you got a R or a D after your name, or you're blue or you're red. You should be voting really according to what ones you think are going to be more godly. And yeah, I understand no person is completely godly. But there's some of them that are somewhat ungodly, and there's some of them that are flat out all the way sold out to evil. And pray that we as the church may reach out, not just within ourselves, and do the business of witnessing to those that are lost, to try to bring them into the kingdom of God while there's still time. You have a blessed day wherever you are. God willing, we'll see you again next week.